For 30 years now, the Profile in Courage Award has been leading the way, honoring people taking the high road. With Martha Teichner, we're about to find out this year's winner in our Sunday morning cover story.
John F. Kennedy in front of PT 109, the famous World War II snapshot that doesn't tell the story of how JFK, the war hero, saved the life of a fellow crew member.
In American folklore, the good man always wins. The courageous man comes out.
In 1956, as a young senator, Kennedy published Profiles in Courage about some of his own heroes, 8 U.S. senators who did what they thought was right, not what was popular.
Somebody who's willing to go against the wishes of his constituents for what he considers the best interests of the country,
even if it destroyed their political careers.
In 1989, our family was thinking about how to memorialize him, and we decided to do it by honoring the quality that he thought was most essential in public life, which was courage.
Since then, every year, the Profile in Courage Award has been given for an act or a lifetime of political courage, party not an issue. Caroline Kennedy makes the presentation, now joined by her son, Jack Schlossberg. Civic involvement is your inherited legacy in so many ways.
To think that I inherited a legacy of public service just based on the fact that I'm related to public servants would be to misunderstand what they stood for. So I think everyone inherits a legacy of public service just based on the men and women who have served before them and who have made our country what it is today.
We wanted something that would be both symbolic and beautiful.
It's silver and heavy and made to look like a ship's lantern.
Hopefully the symbolism of the lantern will also help us all go forward following our courageous leader.
What does it say?
That's a quote from the book.
In whatever arena of life one may meet the challenge of courage, whatever may be the sacrifice he faces if he follows his conscience, each man, I think he meant man or woman, must decide for himself the course he will follow.
Elected mayor of New Orleans in 2010, 5 years after Hurricane Katrina, Mitch Landrieu inherited a city still ravaged by the storm.
I would tell the people of New Orleans, look, if we're going to come back, you have to sacrifice. This is going to hurt.
On his watch, the city was rebuilt. New hospitals, new schools, a new airport, a massive new flood protection system. But it was something much riskier politically that won Landrieu last year's Profile in Courage Award. Something suggested to him by his friend since childhood, trumpeter and New Orleans native Wynton Marsalis.
He said, look, you should take those monuments down.
Marsalis was talking about the Confederate statues regarded as an affront by African Americans who represent more than 60% of the city's population.
When he said that to me, really, it was like getting hit in the head with a bat.
He waited, then chose his moment.
There is a difference, you see, between remembrance of history and the reverence of it.
After white supremacist Dylan Roof killed 9 African Americans in a Charleston, South Carolina church. Taking advantage of the national outrage, Landrieu announced that in New Orleans, the Confederate monuments would be removed.
The blowback was immediate. Anybody who showed up to say they wanted to help started receiving awful telephone calls, death threats. The first contractor that showed up had his car firebombed.
Did you have threats against you?
Constantly. It was very intense.
But finally, by May 2017, after more than 2 years of legal wrangling, all 4 of the monuments had come down.
I was really just doing what I thought was the right thing. And I just didn't want to walk away from it because I wanted to be able to live with myself.
In his introduction to Profiles in Courage, JFK wrote, "Compromise need not mean cowardice," a surprising concept in today's climate of political divisiveness, along with bipartisanship.
John McCain was given the award in conjunction with Russ Feingold for the bipartisan work that they did on campaign finance reform.
In 1999, the Profile in Courage Award was given jointly to the 2 senators. Feingold, a Democrat, and McCain, a Republican, together pushed to regulate special interest money in politics.
The two of them were so dedicated to, and it was part of both their lives, but particularly my husband. It was the essence of who he was.
Cindy McCain is John McCain's widow.
Did he get criticized? Was he
Oh,
vilified?
yeah. Oh, gosh.
Cindy McCain remembers it was Ted Kennedy who told her husband he had won the award.
John and Ted were on polar opposites politically. They fought on the floor, swear words, I mean, complete knockdown, drag out. And when it was over, Ted walked over to John, put his arm around him, and said, "Wasn't that fun?"
The day of the ceremony was the McCain son Jimmy's birthday, so the Kennedys arranged for them all to arrive in style on a Coast Guard cutter.
John always described it to our kids, this is kind of a beacon of light.
So it was precious.
It was very precious, yes. This was, I believe, the most special award to John ever.
The Profile in Courage Award has been called the Nobel Prize for public figures. The famous and not so famous have been picked. In 1997, Alabama Circuit Judge Charles Price was honored for making the very unpopular call that his fellow judge, Roy Moore, was violating the Constitution by displaying the Ten Commandments in his courtroom. And in 2000, a kid from South Bend, Indiana, named Pete Buttigieg won the Profile in Courage high school essay contest. He wrote about Bernie Sanders. Now it looks like he's running against him for president. Look at this photograph of another teenager standing next to her idol, Senator John F. Kennedy.
My father was the mayor of Baltimore, and there was a big dinner, black tie dinner, which Senator Kennedy was going to speak. My mother, she said, "If you want to go in my place to the dinner, please do." And I just love it.
That's House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
It's a very sweet picture.
It's a great picture, relating to the inspiration that President Kennedy was to my generation and those that followed.
And yes, Nancy Pelosi is this year's winner of the Profile in Courage Award. In a statement, Caroline Kennedy calls her the most important woman in American political history.
She is the first woman to be Speaker. She's the first woman to be elected Speaker in non-consecutive terms in over 60 years. So the courage that takes really, I think, makes her an example and an inspiration for generations of Americans, men and women.
Coming from Caroline, that's an enormous compliment. However, going with it are shoulders for other people to stand on. I've stood on many women's shoulders who have paved the way for us, and now we have to pave the way for others. So it's about the future. Please don't characterize the strength that I bring to this meeting as the leader of the House Democrats.
Thin-skinned, she is not. And with attacks coming at her, even from within her own party, there's a lesson there.
You have to be ready to take a punch, and you have to be ready to throw a punch. And I'm in the arena, and I know that when you're in the arena, this is what you should expect. But if you don't have the courage, don't get in the arena.